My name is MaggZ, pronouns are she, they, and I'm wearing a black suit jacket with black mini skirts and black top. It's giving Matrix, as always. So I've started working with Next Wave since 2022. I started with producers residence and now I am one of the Young Artistic Directorate. The beauty about this job is there's a lot of flexibility around how do we define the parameters of what we do, coming in as artists, practitioners and curators. But I think we're all trying to figure it out as we go about it. I suppose the role is about how do we integrate our practice as individual artists with community building in mind and coming together as a collective. So that's the role, I would say. And myself as an artist, I am a movement artist, creative director, producer, tapping into research as well. So I would say my practice is very much at the intersection of street dance, installation, technology, and research. So in terms of what I'm challenging or like just investigating now in my practice, I think it's this bigger idea of how do we outbox ourselves? Let me explain that a little bit. I think I kind of get the term outboxing from actually a battle that I entered in Berlin, and the battle is called Outbox Me. And at the time it didn't really click for me, but then somehow it just kind of lingered in my system. So like by outboxing, I mean in, obviously in the current society that we live in, whatever society we are, there are the norms, the rules, and the main thing that I've been really thinking about this year is like a lot of times we are putting ourselves into those boxes. We are putting these restrictions and constraints within us, and a lot of times we're not even aware of it. I think one of my intentions for this year is to really become more aware and be more honest and more reflective when it comes to that process, and I really wish to outbox myself in personal life and in professional practice. My main medium for now, I would say, is dance, but it didn't really click for me probably until when I was 14, 15. Prior to that, it was just agony of training in ballet, you know how it is. But I feel like I still remember that moment when so a bit of background in terms of like what I do right now for the dance practice. The style is called wacking, so W-A-C-K-I-N-G. It's a style that originated in 1970s LA from gay clubs at the time, primarily from the African American Latinx community. And I would say like many other street style, wacking is a style that comes from a complicated place. A lot of it's about turning oppression into expression. So that's kind of like the background of the dance, and I didn't fully get into it till 2014. I think at the time I was just kind of get into street dance, but it's always like a bit of a blur when you kind of step into it in studio. Like sometimes studios will have street style classes, but other will be like choreo classes or commercial classes. So I actually got started back in China, so I think the line was even blurrier. So I remember that one time I was just in the studio kind of wandering around, and I just saw this person doing wacking for the first time ever. And I just remember standing outside of the studio window and just like, whoa, the level of liberation and freedom and the joy they were experiencing. And in that moment I was like, I'm gonna do that. That's what I'm gonna be doing. And I did, and I stuck with it ever since then. So it's been a decade now. Well, actually going into a decade of pursuing this style of dance, but it's not just a dance, it's a culture, it's an essence, it's resilience. There's so many things of it, and it's like the essence of like queer underground culture, but also like how do you pay homage to that culture? How do you, I suppose, like embody the essence of that, but also find the intersection of the essence of who you are? You're asking some really big questions that probably requires like a few months of answers. Maybe a bit of a context about myself. I was born and raised in China, so like all my immediate family is back in China. But we're from a province that's southwest of China, which I feel like that never gets to talk about, especially through like a Western media lens in that sense. But our province is actually the coolest. By the way. Just a bit of context, within China you have like one majority and like 55, I believe, 55 minority groups. So that itself is very interesting and fascinating, and like with a lot of diverse culture within Chinese culture. And from my province in particular, we have, I believe, the most minority groups from my province, like 20 something, close to 30. Yeah, my family's we're actually mostly minority, but I didn't know that probably till 2018. Like for the longest time, we were like, yeah, we're majority, boring, yeah. But then mum did a DNA test in 2018 and she found out that our ancestors are from Tibet. So that's something that I think that was very special, and I think it's something that's definitely going to be like an ongoing journey for me to always, almost like coming out and then going back in, is constantly like learning, relearning process about cultural heritage in that sense. So I think that as a starting point is already quite multifaceted, and on top of that, kind of adding this like Asian Chinese diaspora now living on this land and like the complexity of that. So I first moved here when I was 15 by myself, and it was a very interesting period. I feel like a lot of like very swift, big changes in terms of just like cultural adaptation and certain behavioral pattern that I feel like I adopted really quickly in order to survive. So I feel like I had to grow very fast from a very young age. But I feel like that's quite instrumental in terms of like who I am and my identity in that way. One piece of advice I will give to younger version of myself: stop giving a fuck. I feel like, okay, each year as I get older, I feel more true to myself. I was thinking about it a lot. I'm like, why do I feel that way? And I feel like it's because I really stopped giving a fuck. It's this like people-pleasing tendency, right? And I feel like that needs to be unpacked so much more than the surface level of just like, oh, I just want other people to like me. Because like for the longest time, I'm like, I don't think I'm a people pleaser like at all. Like if you know me, you know I'm very blunt, I'm very direct, and I'm very honest. I say it as it is. And when I'm doing that, I don't really necessarily care about what people are thinking or whatever. But I think going into this year, or coming back from my tour last year, just after being in like all the bigger cities, like it really humbles you and put things into perspective of like how insignificant, but in the best way, that you are. In that sense, I'm like, you know what, like fuck it, like we only get to live once. And I obviously care about people who I care about, but because I feel like I stopped giving a fuck less about any other little trivial things, I have more capacity and more energy to actually care about people and things that I care about. And it just feels so much weight has lifted. I'm just like, this is great, like sick. So I think that's something I would really give my younger self. I think I would ask, if I die tomorrow, would I die happy and content? I feel like every year I ask myself the same question, but in different ways. But kind of just giving like, you know, the intention that I've set for this year, I think I would like to ask myself that question when the year ends. Yeah. Ooh, fuck, that was hard. Multiple identities, I was like, oh god.